The subject matter of today's video may be considered disturbing by some viewers, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a true scary story you want to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. So, for context, I'm an 18-year-old female from the UK, but at the time this story takes place, I was 16. I had just gotten my first job as a cleaner. My boss was my uncle's close friend, and the money was great. My boss is a cool person, friendly, and takes care of his workers. So, in lockdown, I was a cleaner in a warehouse, doing simple jobs such as cleaning tables. I worked part-time as I was attending 6th form. Another man called Gerald would work the afternoon shift, and I would work the morning shift or vice versa. He usually liked to make long chit-chat conversations, which sometimes frustrated me, as he would speak to me when my shift started and he was ending, so we would cross over. Anyways, he would speak to me about law, because I'm studying law. He told me that he studies law as well. He even gave me a university law textbook to look through. The first red flag was that Gerald told me that he was 25. However, he looked old, and he had a bald patch on his head. He clearly was not 25, but somewhere near 40. For a joke, I laughed and said, "You don't look 25. As weeks went by, he would speak to me for half an hour during my shift, which I thought was weird because he was trying to relate to me about random topics. He came into work when my shift was ending, and he looked sad. Being the nice person I am, I asked what was wrong, and he told me that his girlfriend was in a coma due to cancer. I was sympathetic. However, as weeks went on, he would burden me with his home and relationship updates. I found this so weird because I was just 16, and he was a few decades older than me. He would tell white lies and red flags. For example, he said he had a Mustang, a really nice car. He showed me a picture, but it was clearly from Google. I was thinking, is he trying to show off? The biggest red flag was that he gave me his number. Now, I know you're reading this and probably thinking, why did you take it? But I was a kind, big-hearted teenager, and I wanted to help others. It got so weird that he would message me every day, sending me pictures of his girlfriend. Gerald messaged me saying it was his birthday, and said he was sad due to not being able to spend it with his girlfriend. He told me to look at his WhatsApp story. There were hundreds of girls wishing him a happy birthday, which was so weird because the photos were definitely from Google. The text also was always, "Happy birthday, Gerald, can't wait to party later." I'm thinking, why is the text the same if different people are sending him a message for his birthday? He clearly got the photos from Google and pasted them onto his profile, and then added the same text for each one. He could even try to fake it. Another separate time, he would love to argue with his other cleaner who was contracted to the warehouse company, whereas my boss's company was an independent company doing separate jobs in the warehouse. Anyway, I got along with the other cleaner, Mary. She would tell me about the weird things that Gerald was saying to her. Mary was 50 years old and very outspoken. Mary obviously had experience with more people than I did. She told me that she got a bad feeling about Gerald. Gerald would always come into work early to sit at the tables, or to speak to me after my shift. After Mary and Gerald had been arguing, Gerald stood in the corner and stared so creepily at Mary, as if intimidating her on purpose. Just standing there, eyes open wide to scare her. This sent a shiver down my spine. I went over to Mary and asked if she was okay. She said she was fine. Gerald actually looked like he could murder Mary right there. This scared me. His eyes are something that I will never forget. I also remember when I had first started the job, this warehouse worker came up to me and asked what was Gerald's name. I replied with 2 names, as Gerald went by a couple different names. I found this off. Red flag number 100. The warehouse worker said he recognized him from somewhere. A few months later, the warehouseman walked up to me and showed me a screenshot from a police website. Gerald was wanted, as he was posing as a lawyer, which was another lie. He was never studying law like he told me. He would scam old people into giving him hundreds. Him and his equally sick brother devised a plan into conning vulnerable, single, elderly people. He was described in the post to be a man who everyone should stay away from. I was shocked. Immediately, I went home and told my mom and showed her the screenshot that I found online. She was horrified and said she was glad that I didn't speak to him anymore or see him at work. I also told my dad what happened. He looked angry. He said, "What the hell?" And my dad told me that he knew who this man was, and that he was a creep and dangerous. His whole family were scammers and drug dealers, and involved in shady business. My dad said if he ever saw this man, he would beat the crap out of him. That week he left work, and I didn't see him again, until a few months later. I asked my boss one day what happened to Gerald. He told me that he had caught Gerald drinking on the job. This surprised me, as usually I had a good radar and could tell if someone had been drinking. I was shocked. As previously mentioned, I did see Gerald again. My boss would ask me to do random shifts in hotels for cash in hand. My boss had picked up Gerald and drove to my house to pick me up so we could all clean the hotel. I didn't know why my boss still had Gerald as a worker. I think he felt sorry for him, to be honest. I was so panicked as now Gerald knew where I lived. This unsettled me because my family and I are very private people, and we only let close friends and family know where we live. I was shocked to see him in the car, as I had not seen him for months. Had I known before getting in the car that Gerald would be there, I wouldn't have done the job. I got in the car and he said a simple, "Hello." I was blunt with him and only spoke to my boss. I didn't care if I came across as mean, because I knew what a horrid, evil person Gerald was. And this experience has taught me a lot. It taught me to always trust my gut, and that first impressions are 9 times out of 10 correct. I haven't seen Gerald since, and I hope it stays that way. Gerald, you took my kindness and used it as a way to get close to me for God knows what reason. You were a creep. I do hope the karma gets to you. You used old people and scammed them as a way to make money. You're disgusting. And I hope that we never meet again. I, 21 female, work at a library. My job consists of fixing broken technology and hanging out in the teen area to make sure nobody dies. Tonight, 2 teenaged boys walk in about 15 minutes removed from each other. One of them was fine, logged into a video game and started playing. The other one was considerably less fine. I knew something was a bit strange almost immediately. He smelled like bologna and body odor, and seemed to stare at me wherever I went with this unreadable expression. But hey, sometimes teenagers are weird and sometimes they smell bad, so I brushed it off. While I was putting books back on the shelves, he followed me around. He asked me if my personality matched my combat boots. I didn't really know how to respond, so I said yes. He then asked me if I liked to try new things, in a way that was pretty suggestive now that I think about it. I completely missed his cue, though. I blame my asexuality. Regardless, I told him that I liked to try new things, assuming he was talking about sports or food or something. He then asked if I wore leather. I said no, once again having no idea what he was actually talking about. The shelving continued, and he told me that he could never work my job. I asked why not. He gestured to the other boys in the library, celebrating that he'd done well in a match of Fortnite. He then told me in an almost bragging way that he was too much of an asshole to ever tolerate the kids the way that I can. Now, when someone tells me they are an asshole, I tend to take their word for it, so he wasn't exactly getting brownie points with that particular sentiment. I shrugged and told him I liked the jobs and that kids were actually a bonus to me. Eventually, I sat back down at the desk, and he pulled a chair up so closely that I could feel his breath on my back. He asked me why I wore a mask. I couldn't at this point report him to security on the computer because he was right behind me, and I didn't want to risk making him angry. I told him it was because I was recovering from a cold. He seemed to accept this answer for a while, until he saw me remove my mask briefly to drink from my water bottle. Once I put my mask back on, he poked me in the arm, telling me to leave the mask off. He told me I was too pretty to wear something like that. At that point, I was basically done. I emailed my coworker saying I was ready for my break, intending to hopefully wait him out. But my coworker was trying to fix something somewhere else in the library, and once again, reporting him to security was off the table. So, I would have to endure it a little longer. He asked me about where I lived, what social media I used, could he have my social media, where my hometown was, etc. I managed to dodge questions as he leaned towards me, his breath smelling like a year-old pound of bacon, and his face inches from the back of my head. Eventually, he got up to leave and walked out of the room. I breathed a sigh of relief and got back to whatever I was doing before. But then, he came back in and kept talking. My coworker arrived just as I was explaining to him once again that it was unprofessional to give him my social media usernames, and I promptly got up and went to the restroom, bidding the strange boy a good night, hoping he would get the hint and leave. Nope, he was still there when I returned. My coworker thanked me for returning to save him from the patron. Apparently, while the boy wasn't sexually harassing the coworker, he was inexplicably intense. He attempted to drum up more conversation after that, but I think after a while he got bored and left. I reported him to security and tried to go back to being productive, but I just wanted to call my mom and crawl back into bed at that point. So, not much else got done. I'm 20 and female, and this happened a month ago, and it went on for about 2 weeks. So, I was a part-time Goodwill cashier, and was sent to put away clothes in the back. One thing that you have to understand about Goodwill is that they take in people who haven't had the best past, and try to bring them in and give a better life. They're called variables. So, I'm in the back putting clothes away, and my manager brings out one of the variables to help me. Now, mind you, I wasn't really paying attention when he started putting clothes away. This dude sees me and says, "Man, this job sucks, doesn't it?" And I'm all like, well, it does have its negatives. And at that point, I'm just agreeing to his small talk. We get finished, and then I take my break. When I'm finished, I then go out to the floor, and there he is sitting on one of the couches waiting for me to help him sweep the floor. By then, I was like, "Okay, dude, but you leave in like 10 minutes. He just said it will be what keeps him busy until then. So, while I was sweeping, he just kept following me and was asking me about what college I go to, and just personal questions. Don't get me wrong, I like to talk to people and keeping the conversation, but this dude was asking me questions that he doesn't really need to know. I tried my best to steer the subject away from my personal life. It worked, but then he started asking me, "How old do you think I am?" I was just really tired at that point and guessed in his late 20s. He then said, "Don't make me blush," in a babyish tone. Now this creeped me out more than I already was. He answered that he was 36, and later said that we should hang out and go to Taco Bell together. In my head, I was thinking, dude, you were supposed to leave like 10 minutes ago. And he kept asking me, what time do you leave? And I said, when we close. Thinking back, I wasn't really worried about why he was asking me that, but it was still odd. So he finally leaves because I had to tell him that I needed to catch my last break. 3 days later, he comes back to the store, but he isn't a variable. He's in his regular clothes instead of his blue vest, so he was just a customer. Once again, I'm putting clothes away and he sees me and says, "You look tired, hun. When you take your break, let's head to Taco Bell together." I said I couldn't in the best way possible, but after he just kept following me around the store and making small talk. I then lose him and do my thinking throughout the day. While that was happening, I notice him leaving the store and come back 3 times. He then sits on the couch and keeps looking at me. By then, I just flat out ignore him and go to lunch. When I come back, he's gone and I steer my attention to other things. Finally, when the store was about to close, one of the assistant managers brings me back to the office and tells me to be careful around the variable who keeps following me. She kept saying that he tried to get with one of the other female workers in the back, and she was underage. Apparently he worked at another Goodwill, where he had kept doing the same thing. The most important thing that she noticed was that he has been in the men's restroom for about 2 hours doing God knows what. I knew he did weed, but it's stupid to do that at a Goodwill. She basically kicked him out and he finally went to his car. The day before that, he never came to the store and was only in his car until the store closed. She had then noticed that the car belonged to him. The final nail in the coffin was when I had left to walk to my car and noticed a car with its headlights down about 10 feet away from my car. I was always weirded out when cars would park at the Goodwill parking lot at night, but this car looked suspicious. I honestly wanted to go home and was just really too tired, but what happened next definitely woke me the hell up. While I was unlocking my door, I heard a car door open and I hear a familiar voice yell, "Hey, do you want to hang out?" I got out of my tired stupor and turned to this voice, and sure as hell it was the dude that kept following me from the other day. I was really confused and shook in my mind. I was thinking of an excuse because I didn't want to hang out with this dude. He was about to walk over to my car, but thankfully my manager walked out of the store to lock up the shop. He then noticed her and quickly got in his car and sped off. My heart was racing a mile a minute. I ran up to her and told her that this pedo was in his car waiting for me again, and that this was the last straw. We talked about what had happened, and went the same way home to make sure that this dude didn't follow me. I got home and told my mom what had happened. When I got this job, my mom said that it wasn't worth it. But this really gave her a reason to tell me to quit. I was going to regardless. The next morning, I gave my manager my 2 weeks. She'd completely understood, and she then told me that she had reported him to the police. I'm not sure what would have happened in this situation. It happened more than 10 years ago, but I still wonder sometimes. When I was a teenager, my favorite thing to do was listen to music. It brought me into another world, away from the chaos of my toxic family and school life. I listened to music almost all of my free time. One thing that really enhanced my music was motion. Walking, running, or more passive forms of motion like swinging on the swings. I hadn't yet discovered driving, so swinging was my favorite way to listen to music. At age 16, nearly every night between 8 p.m. to about 1 a.m., I would go out to the swing set behind a nearby church and swing for hours with my headphones on. The darkness also enhanced my music because there was less visual stimulus to distract me. And it was very dark. The street was well lit, but the church building blocked out all that light, and the swings were set pretty far back from the road, behind the back parking lot. There was nothing but a dark field, the playground and swings, and an empty parking lot back there. I kept my head on a swivel. I'd watched enough serial killer documentaries to have a healthy amount of paranoia. So, every time I swung forward, my eyes would scan 180 degrees to the right, and every time I'd swung back, I'd scan 180 degrees to the left. Because of my vigilance, I felt quite safe, confident that I could spot anyone before they came close to me. This kept up for at least 2 years with no problem, but I never let my guard down. One night, I was swinging away and noticed something unusual. At head height, poking around the side of the church, was a shape that I hadn't noticed before, like the head of a person who wanted to hide. At first, I couldn't quite tell, but I locked focus on it until it disappeared back around the corner and out of sight. Then it poked back out again. Then it disappeared. It did this several more times before I became absolutely sure someone was watching me who did not want to be seen. At best, they wanted to steal my iPod and my headphones. But it could have been something far worse. I didn't want to stick around to find out. I very casually got up off the swing and started walking back to the street, around the opposite side of the church to where he was standing. And then, he immediately began walking straight towards me. I picked up my pace into a speed walk, but I didn't break into a run. He did the same. After speed walking for maybe a minute with him close behind, I finally made it to the street. He also reached the street at the same time, about 20 feet away to my right. He then took off running down the sidewalk in the opposite direction. I was so freaked out at the close call, wondering what could have happened. My heart was pounding and I went home and told my best internet friend about it. He laughed and asked why I was so scared. I thought maybe other people wouldn't understand and it was a you had to be there kind of thing, so I never told anyone after that. I didn't go back to that swing set for at least 2 months, and when I did, it was much less frequent and at more random times. I eventually stopped going altogether when my family moved away. And this is one of the creepier things that has happened to me. Just a little warning, this is my first Reddit post. This story is probably a little shorter than most, and some might not find it creepy, but to this day, I still have a deep mistrust of people in full body costumes, think mascots, because of this encounter. And this happened when I was around 10 or 11 years old, putting it somewhere between 2007 and 2008. I have a pretty terrible memory when it comes to my childhood, but I'm pretty sure it happened before I was in middle school. For a bit of context, the street that I grew up on was one of those streets with a bunch of kids who always hung out after school. My family knew almost everyone on our street, save for a couple of houses. Even if a family didn't have kids our age, most people would at least come out for holidays like the 4th of July. So, as we grew up, we had a general idea of who our neighbors were. My younger brother, D, who's 3 years younger than me, and I were especially close with the family about 5 houses down and across the street. Their son, T, was a year younger than me, and his little sister, A, was only a year or 2 younger than my brother, so we hung out a lot. On this particular day, D and I asked our parents if we could go play with T and A at their house, and, considering it was still early in the evening, they agreed. Due to the close distance, the walk to their house only ever took a minute or so. As D and I started on our way, I couldn't help but notice a strange figure in the distance, dressed in all black from head to toe. I thought it was weird, of course, but I couldn't tell which way they were facing, and T's house was close, so I didn't give them too much thought. As we got closer, however, I realized the figure was walking towards us. As we got closer to each other, I realized they weren't dressed in all black, they were wearing a gorilla suit. It was super strange, and even to this day, I have no logical explanation for this. I was definitely creeped out, and I wish I could say that that was where my creepy encounter ended, but unfortunately that's not the case. D and I were only a house away from our friend's house at this point, but the closer we got to their house, the closer we got to this gorilla person. Right as we started to turn to get onto the sidewalk, the person started almost galloping toward us, making loud gorilla noises. Mind you, this person hadn't said a word this entire time, and now they were rushing towards us making these strange noises, so we, of course, panicked. My brother and I started sprinting towards T's house, my heart pounding hard in my chest as I thought about what might happen if this gorilla person got to us first. We started pounding on the door and T's mom answered, looking concerned and confused. Through the tears that I was fighting so hard to hold back, I somehow managed to say something about the creep who had started rushing at us, and she quickly ushered us inside. We told her about what happened, and she checked outside, but the person was long gone at that point. After that, we never saw that person or costume again. What gets me most about this, and what still sends shivers up my spine, is that we never found out who this person was. They likely were just some adult who thought it would be hilarious to scare the crap out of a couple of kids, but the fact that we'll never know for sure still creeps me out. Considering we knew almost everyone on our street, I thought maybe at some point someone would joke about the time they scared me and my brother, and we would all have a good laugh about it. But that day never came. At this point, I don't think we'll ever know who it was or why they were wearing a gorilla suit in the first place. Stay safe out there, y'all. And if you're the person who chased 2 kids in a gorilla suit costume 14 to 15 years ago, thanks for the lifelong trauma. Back when I was 19, I had moved in with some folk I knew as the family dynamic back at home. It was tense, to say the least. I became acquaintances with a guy named Richard, 4 years older than me through a family friend called Gemma, who lived nearby. It was quite obvious from the get-go that he liked me, although I always made it clear that I only saw him as a friend. He would call or message me to check how I was, sometimes trying to force a more flirty conversation, but I was adamant about how I felt about him, much to his disappointment. On a few occasions, he even brought me top-up credit for my phone when I had ran out, without my knowledge or consent. I told him that it made me uncomfortable, and I didn't think he should be buying me it, but He insisted that because he had paid for it, I might as well use it or it would be wasted. The last time he did, I threw the receipt with the top-up code printed on it in the bin, which might have been a spiteful move on my part, but I was frustrated with him for not taking my feelings about it into consideration. Safe to say, he was pissed off with me, but I thought, okay, he might start getting the message now, and to be honest, he went quiet. So I thought he did. One evening, a few weeks later, I was in the study on MSM chatting to a couple of friends. The house was a large bungalow. The computer was situated in front of a small window, which looked out onto a fence which ran around the perimeter of the property. Beyond that, I could see the tops of a row of houses, one of which my friend Gemma lived in. A notification pops up, and I see it's Richard. He asks me how I am, and I try and make non-awkward conversations with him, just simple, polite small talk. I decided to go and make myself a cup of tea, and simply typed, "Be right back." When I'm done, I walk back to the study, and as I'm stepping through the doorway, I slightly trip on a raised lip of laminate floor, spilling some of my tea on my hand. I stop to switch hands and wipe my wet hand on my t-shirt when I hear the ding of an MSM notification coming from my computer. I was still stood a few feet away from it, so I couldn't see what it said. As I walked up to the desk to put my cuppa down, I see the chat box with Richard is open, and upon seeing what he wrote, I was immediately freaked out. "Don't spill your tea," he had written. I quickly scanned outside and couldn't see anyone, and very quickly shut the blind. I asked him how he knew, and he just wrote, "LOL," and wouldn't tell me when I pressed him for an answer. The only reasonable explanation I could think of was that he had been at my friend Gemma's house and must have been watching me through her upstairs bedroom window. Although, given the line of sight and the height of the fence, that would have been pretty difficult. I did ask her a few days later, and she told me that he hadn't been there, and was also pretty weirded out by the whole thing. Safe to say, I pretty quickly ceased all contact with him after that, and luckily he left me alone. Although, I do still have to wonder how he was able to watch me. And this isn't the scariest story on this sub, but I consider myself a pretty alert and vigilant guy who manages to avoid a lot of creepy encounters. These things don't happen to me often, so when they do, they stand out. It was a few months ago. I had just gone thrift shopping around 8:30 p.m. at Value Village. I didn't find anything good, but I didn't want to waste the trip, so before heading home, I decided to take my dog out of the car for a quick walk around the block. I smoked some, and unexpectedly got really into the walk. The night air was cool and refreshing, the rain felt nice on my face, and the ground beneath my feet was unusually satisfying to walk on. It was pretty blissful, so I really took my time circling back to my car. Once I got back, the Value Village was closed and my car was the only one left in the parking lot. All the lights in the lot were off. I walked through the darkness to my car with very little situational awareness and unlocked it with the fob. I didn't even notice the guy at the bus stop before he started talking to me. The bus stop was at the street, right in front of the parking lot, about 30 feet from my car. He was behind the bus stop, not in front of it, where someone would wait for the bus. There was nobody else around. He asked, "Can I have a cigarette?" I told him I don't smoke. He began to come toward me, but stopped, and then followed up with, "Do you have any money?" To which I said, "No, sorry." I instantly got a bad feeling about him. Something was off. I've worked with homeless people for years, and I get asked for cigarettes and money often, but there was something different about this. Maybe because the way he phrased the question was a little different than how most people ask. When I said no, he stared at me for a few seconds and then turned, quickly walked away, around a wall and out of sight. At this point, I knew I had to keep an eye on that corner. I just knew he was going to come back. I only took my eyes off of it to open the rear door and put my dog in the back seat. My dog doesn't always get in the car right away and takes some convincing. I tried to rush it as much as possible, yanking his leash upward, until he jumped in maybe 5 seconds later. I buckled him in, and I shut the door. I whipped my head back around towards the corner, and the guy wasn't there. He was behind me. He was quietly approaching, about 10 feet away with his hands in his jacket. Not in the pockets or the bottom of his jacket, but through the top of the slightly opened zipper. I made eye contact with him, and he just stopped moving. He just looked in another direction and froze. I used this time to get into my vehicle and lock the door. It felt like it took ages because I was still slightly stoned and my reflexes were slow. If he hadn't stopped walking, he probably would have been able to reach me before I got in. I just drove off, and mostly forgot about it until now. There was nothing else in that parking lot. No reason for him to be there. It was super weird, and ever since then I've remembered to be more mindful of my surroundings. So, I work at a pet boarding and daycare facility in mid-Florida. We have a lot of homeless encounters, but this one is by far the scariest. We open at 8 every day of the week. However, all staff must come in at 7 to make sure all guests are walked and fed before we open. On this particular morning, around 7:10, I was on my second dog in our back walking yards, and I'd seen some commotion around the front bushes that separate our front walking yard for the smaller dogs and is directly in front of the yard I was in. I figured someone just had an early drop-off. However, a few moments later, I then hear something like pottery shattering. And this, of course, piqued my interest, and I walked through the front walking yard and inside to our front boarding area to ask the receptionist if she had heard all the commotion while she was cleaning the little dogs area. She said she hadn't, but that a homeless man had come in and asked to use the bathroom, and she let him in. He did creep her out some as he was mumbling and not looking her in the face as he spoke, but she just wanted to be kind to the man and he gave her no issues. I then go into the front reception area to check outside for the possible source of the noise, and I see the man. He's rummaging through his backpack while his bike is leaned up against our building. He then got up and started pacing back and forth on the sidewalk, and his presence made me quite uncomfortable. So, while he wasn't looking, I went and locked the front door. After this was done, I stepped back to watch him from the room next to our reception area, and I see that he's screaming and flailing his arms as if he's arguing with someone. This seems like a cause for alarm, so I run and grab the second kennel attendant, and we call the police as this man is destroying our Memorial Day decorations outside and still yelling. Once he notices my coworker on the phone, he says, "You don't need to call the police. Can I just come in and have some water?" He then tries to open the door and realizes it's locked. He immediately freaks out, screaming at us and threatening us, saying, "Call the effing police. Let me in this freaking building," while banging on the door. He then hears sirens from an unrelated situation and decides to ride off. After a good amount of time, I go to inspect what he was breaking, and it turns out that he had taken all of our flags out of the ground and broke them and then threw them on the sidewalk, as well as taking our wreaths down and throwing them, one landing behind the dumpster, 20 feet away. He'd also smashed a small porcelain container that he had brought with him as well, throwing a key card to a hotel, some orange duct tape, black rope, and a small travel-sized bottle of shampoo with the orange duct tape over the top of it. The police never showed, because he had rode away while we were on the phone with them, but it definitely was the scariest thing that I've experienced while working there. And this story goes way back to 1998, when I was 16 years old. I was with my two other friends, who I'll just call Ben and Jake for privacy reasons. It was a late summer evening on a Saturday, and I was sitting in my room listening to some 80s rock as teenagers back then would do. I got bored after some time and went outside to meet Ben and Jake. We were chilling in Ben's garage for a while, and drinking beer and smoking some. We got bored pretty quickly and went out to do some teenage stuff. I remember we were walking down this narrow path by the woods and down towards a lake. Back in the late 90s, there was a popular hangout spot for teenagers there, so we were hoping for seeing some other kids there. When we arrived, there was no one there except the sounds of crickets out in the tall grass. We sat for a while on a bench and just talked for about 15 minutes when Jake wanted to go to an old fishing hut by the lake. We all agreed on going inside and exploring it. We entered the hut. While Jake and Ben were walking around and breaking stuff, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. We went upstairs where there was an old wooden boat lying there, with a fishing net over it. We were kind of checking it out, when all of a sudden we heard the wooden door to the hut creak open. We could hear heavy footsteps entering down below, followed by heavy breathing. We all stopped dead in our tracks and almost held our breath. There was around a 5-second break that felt like an eternity when suddenly a man spoke in a drunken voice. "I know you're here. Come out wherever you are, you little brats." And the heavy footsteps started to walk towards the stairs as the old floor creaked underneath. Jake went inside the wooden boat and the rest of us followed. We put the fishing net over our heads and didn't move. The man arrived upstairs, and we could hear him stumbling around. "I can hear you." We were sitting dead still, but I could feel the fear in all of us. The man was walking around and moving stuff. I was thinking of a plan to escape without being caught, but we literally were like sitting ducks. Suddenly, we could feel the fishing net being ripped off. "Here you are." Jake reacted the fastest and pushed him away so the man fell onto his back. We all ran like hell out of there and through the tall grass into the woods. We could hear the man give a chase, but he gave up, probably due to his drunken state. And we all went back to Ben's garage and fell onto the couch out of exhaustion. Jake then told us that the man dropped a knife when he fell to the floor, and we all just sat in shock for the rest of the night. To this day, I can't help myself but wonder what would have happened if Jake hadn't pushed the man. So this, my friends, was this week's collection of creepy encounters and stalker stories. And as always, it was a collection of some of the creepiest encounters with people. People are genuinely scary. Not like people are just, like, if you see a person, be scared. But, like, people are genuinely scary whenever they act creepy. I don't know what am I trying to say here? If you see person and person is scary, be scared? I don't know. Hopefully you enjoyed this collection. Hopefully someone out there can take something from it. Be more aware of your surroundings. Be more aware of what's going on, and try to live and work with a plan as you go through your daily life. And if you did enjoy the video, please consider hitting that thumbs up button. You can also subscribe to the channel if you're new, which would be greatly appreciated, and leave me a comment, letting me know your thoughts, saying, "Damn, Raven, your throat is still scratchy. What the hell is wrong with you?" I don't know. I really do not know. I'm trying my best out here, though, so you should know how long it took me to record these stories, having to pause, clear my throat, drink water, and continue consistently. Let's just say I started this last night. Yeah. Anyways, friends, if you did, I already said all that, never mind. I'll say it again. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me some love, thumbs up, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Yeah. And I guess that's it. So until next time, my friends, remember you're loved, you're important, you're valid, you're the best you can be, and no one can take that from you. Don't let anyone say otherwise. And until I see you again, which hopefully is next video, I hope that you sleep well.